Thank you to My Jewish Learning for this great opportunity. What a blessing to connect with all of you all over the place. Such a wonderful thing. I'm here just outside Jerusalem in a little moshav, little village called Beit Zayit. And it's really wonderful to connect with you all. Here in Israel, we are already celebrating the first night of this beautiful new month of Elul that we're going to learn all about together. So for me, it's, I've already had some time to enter into it. And for you, it will be coming soon if it's not there already, wherever you are. So let's explore it together. I'm going to share my screen. Was there a link for the PDF for people who want to open it on their own computers too?
Yep, I'll drop that in the chat.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So anyone who wants to, you can open it yourself, or you can just look at the screen. I'm going to just open the handout here. There you go. Okay. So during the class, at any point, if you want to, please just use the raise hand function or just wave at the screen to let it be known that you have something to say. I'm going to be looking at the sources while I'm reading them, but then in between every source, I'll come back and just check in with you all. I really want to hear your questions and comments, have a real conversation with you all about it. So please do jump in if you have what to say by raising your hand or waving. So the very first source we're going to look at together is from Sefer Yetzirah, a pretty mysterious work. It's our very first work that we have of Jewish mysticism. It's even before Kabbalah, according to academics anyway. Kabbalah really doesn't begin till later, but it's sometimes called a work of proto-Kabbalah, like what leads to Kabbalah. And the tradition says maybe it was written by Abraham, or maybe it was written by Rabbi Akiva, or maybe both. And academics say it was written a little bit later probably by some of the same sages who wrote the Talmud. It may be, say, the 5th or 6th centuries. Either way, still comes first out of anything else that we actually have in the mystical tradition. And it tells us a lot of quite mysterious things. It's kind of has a kind of magical and meditative quality. It's not really like a straightforward work of just information. And one of the sections is what you see here in front of you. It's a little passage about each month. And this is the little passage, almost like a poem really, about the month of Elul that we're entering into now. And for each month, it tells us the qualities of the month that we want to pay attention to. So it tells us, for example, you'll see on the 4th line, the constellation of the month, the star sign of the month, which aligns nicely with Western astrology. It's Virgo, which in Hebrew is the Betula, the Virgin. We're going to come back to that. It also tells us that the human faculty of the month on the first line is action. And that's really interesting because action might sound very general, right? As some of the other qualities, other months, we have seeing, hearing, eating, sleeping, and so on. But this month is action. I'd like us to bear that in mind. Everything we're going to explore about this month, that there's a certain kind of active quality to it. But first, we're going to see a beautiful teaching from the great Chasidic master, the Bnei Yissaschar, on that. And then maybe after we've read his commentary on what we just saw, then maybe I'll check in with all of you and see what your thoughts on that are. Maybe I'll have some questions for you as well. So he says, the Bnei Yissaschar, great Chasidic master, as I said, he wrote this book actually on the months of the year. So every month has a chapter. And he says about our month, Elul is especially suitable for Teshuva. That's the spiritual work of the season, getting ready for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the New Year, the work already of returning. Teshuva literally means returning. We sometimes translate it as repentance or making amends, but literally it's returning. Returning to, I put here our best selves, but also returning to the divine. That's a very important meaning too. And he says the judgments or severities of Tammuz and Av, the previous months, are sweetened in Elul. So he's giving us a little bit of orientation in the calendar. He's reminding us that the 2 months leading up to Elul are actually quite challenging. We actually have the 3 weeks of mourning for the destruction of our temple, and we have there the invitation really reaches its pinnacle on Tisha B'Av, that we had the fast day of Av, the invitation to focus on what's broken in the world, what's missing, what's lacking. And really, I could say Judaism's overall incredibly optimistic and happy, but Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av that we had not so long ago, 3 weeks ago, is really truly the saddest day in our calendar. And from there, we've steadily been ascending. The calendar's been leading us on this upward trajectory in a good way, to Elul, where now we're going to see the energy and the invitation and the opportunity of the month is much more loving and optimistic. And we'll see that in the next little source, also from the B'nai Yisroel here. It says, first of all, he quotes Sefer Yetzirah that we just saw, saying that Virgo, or the Virgin, the Betula, is the astrological sign, the constellation of this month. And then he says, the Jewish people are always like a virgin who has never been ruled over by any man. Sorry, I should say ruled over by any man. They are as dear to their beloved, as it were, every time, just like the first moment. And the constellation of this month, which is especially suitable for Teshuva, is Virgo. Because through Teshuva, we become like new creations as if we have never been ruled over by the evil impulse. So I'll just say a couple of words about this. First of all, it might be striking to some of you. It is, quite a provocative image that's being used. But even from our earliest rabbinic sources, even really being hinted to a little bit in the Torah, there's this, and certainly in the prophets, there's this suggestion that we are in a love relationship with the divine. Sometimes it's that we are the young maiden, and that the divine is going to betroth us and then marry us and so on. And sometimes the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai is depicted in that way, for example, with the marriage with the divine. And so here he's drawing on a very, very long tradition of depicting our relationship with the divine in this way. Certainly, in the Song of Songs also, we see a very intimate love relationship there that is put in the Bible because it's an allegory of relationship between us and the divine also. And he's saying, not only are we in this love relationship, but we're always at the beginning of it. We're always in a state where there's this special quality of newness. And that our month of Elul, which is the last month of the year, right? This is the final month of all the months before we go into the new year. This is actually the time for becoming new, because this is the time of Teshuva, of, again, returning to ourselves, returning to the divine. And something about that is, as he says, is about becoming a Bria Chadasha. That's the last two Hebrew words on the penultimate line of the Hebrew there. Kabriya Chadasha, making ourselves like a new creation. And something about that is also restoring our relationship with the divine to its very beginning. So just like to come back to you all now and stop sharing my screen to see if anyone has any thoughts, responses, questions about any of that. Then please feel free to raise your hand, as Julie said, the easiest way to do it, or you could put your responses in the chat too, that's fine. If not, we'll carry on, that's great. We have lots more to see. And I'll come up with some more specific questions on these sources to elicit more responses.
We got a question about the etymology of what's the etymology of the word Elul?
Oh. So etymology, I can't say much about, except that most of our months are actually names that were given to the months in Babylon. I think this one included, which means it wasn't actually a Hebrew word originally. But since the question is coming up, it seems important to say that the tradition makes many acronyms out of the four letters of the word Elul. So Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed. The most famous one, some of you may have heard this, is Ani Ledodi V'Dodi Li, which is a verse from the Song of Songs. That means, I am for my beloved and my beloved is for me, or I am my beloved's and my beloved is mine. So actually, thank you to whoever asked the question, because that also really fits the energy of this source we just saw, that we're going to be renewing our love relationship with the divine as we go into the new year. I see another question. Can you say more about the place of the constellations of astrology in Judaism? Sure, it's a big subject. Essentially, a lot of our Kabbalistic teachers, a lot of our mystical sources, and even those people who thought of themselves in the Middle Ages as rationalists, took it as a given, took it as granted, that just like in surrounding cultures, there was a relationship between what happens down here and what happens up there in the heavens, in the literal heavens that we can see. And basically Maimonides came along in the 12th century, and really challenged that and started a new stream of more cynical or empiricism-based approach to that question. And that tends to be very popular still among many Jews today, you know, a more kind of like rationalist approach, which is kind of less embarrassing in front of our modern scientific friends. But the truth is, many of our sources take it for granted that the movement of the heavenly spheres has an effect on us, just like the moon has an effect on the tides and the water, and therefore also on the water in our bodies also. There's there's a lot more to say. There's books and books and books about that, but that would be my summary for right now. Wonderful. I'm happy to keep moving. Please keep coming in with your questions and comments. Say I'll come up with some other specific things to ask you shortly. In fact, the next couple of sources give us some good grist for that. So we have a source here from Rav Kook, great mystic of the 20th century. He was also a great legal authority and the first chief rabbi of Israel, the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel, priestly Israel, but a towering mystic and poet, a beautiful and huge soul. And he writes here in Orot HaTorah over the page, the righteous person must have creative, imaginative faith in their own life, meaning that they believe that their very lives and their emotions that come straight from the foundation of their soul are good and upright and will lead them on the correct path. The Torah should be a guiding light through which we see where we may go astray, for sometimes the soul wanders in directionless chaos, but one should constantly be in a state of spiritual self-confidence. So I wanted to bring this source here for a few reasons. You know, one reason is his stress. You know, when he says in the second line on the Hebrew, "Sheya'amin," that the person should believe in themselves. He says in another place that emunah, that to be somebody who ya'amin, ma'amin, somebody who believes, is not just to receive something passively. It's to have, as I've translated it here, creative, imaginative faith, meaning an active kind of faith that I actually have to constantly make for myself. So it's not just, oh, what do I feel like today? What happens to be going on? It's more like, what do I want to cultivate? What do I want to essentially make myself believe? It's a choice to believe things rather than just passively accept whatever's going on already. And the other reason I wanted to bring this here is because I think sometimes, especially when the word Teshuva is translated as repentance, and often when we're talking about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and the New Year, I don't know what synagogues you may or may not go to. I know the synagogues that I grew up going to, there was always this heavy feeling. There was always this feeling of like, oh, everyone make yourself feel sad and guilty, and we don't really know why. We just know there's this like vague feeling of seriousness and guilt. And it wasn't very inviting. It wasn't very exciting or appealing. And it didn't really strike me as very authentic. But for a lot of people, this is the energy of the high holy days. It's this I want to say really guilt, essentially. It's this vague sense of like, let's make ourselves feel bad. And actually, Rav Kook is teaching us something really important here, which is we have to have faith, as he says, in that our emotions, as he says, that come straight from the foundation of our soul, are actually good and upright. And as he says, we have to have faith in our own life. We have to have a kind of essential, and again, it's not a passive faith that we just have or we don't. We have to actively cultivate this positive, as he says in the last line, a spiritual self-confidence, a kind of sense of, you know what, I'm a human being. I'm sure I'm as messed up as any other human being out there, but I'm okay. I'm fundamentally okay. And for Rav Kook and other mystics, they would say the reason we're fundamentally okay is because we believe in a loving, infinite creator that we are connected to and that we are part of and whose image we're created. But whatever, language works for you around that, we're okay, he's saying. Now, I want to contrast that and I want to ask you something about this with the next source. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, earlier Hasidic master. Now, he actually, Rav Kook came later, said that he was a reincarnation of Rabbi Nachman, which is a fascinating connection because actually their writings do have some similarities, but also a lot of differences. So it's not kind of taken for granted that they are so similar. But Rabbi Nachman says something here that's very, very powerful that I want to contrast with what we just learned and think about together with you. He says here in Likutei Moharan 6.2, the essence of Teshuva is to hear yourself disgraced and remain completely silent. And I want to ask you, first of all, why and how that could be. Like, what's the real teaching there? Like, what's the value of hearing yourself insulted strongly, disgraced, and remaining silent? And second of all, does that contradict what we just learned about having confidence in ourselves? Or is that maybe possible to reconcile that? So I know there's a lot of us, but please don't be intimidated, because I really would love to hear what some of you think about that. I'm going to go on speaking strike, teaching strike, till you answer. I'm just going to drink my tea. What's Rabbi Nachman saying? What's the value? How could it be that hearing yourself strongly insulted is so valuable for this process of Teshuva, returning to our best selves, returning to the divine? You don't have to agree with it. I'd love to hear if anyone connects with, like, has a clue what he's talking about. So a few people are telling me things on the chat. We had a request to share the text on the chat. Oh, to share the screen again. Okay, so I'll do that now. Share the screen. So this is the text. Likutei Moharan 6.2. The essence of Teshuva is to hear yourself disgraced and remain completely silent. Okay, now I'm going to come back to you all and read these wonderful things which are coming in on the chat. Accept and reflect on the criticism. Beautiful. It opens us up to hearing. Beautiful. Humility. Beautiful. Gives on humility. Someone else said humility too. To inspire introspection. Beautiful. If you are fully confident and strong inside yourself, what others think or say about you will not affect your savlanut. Beautiful. So, okay, so interesting. Actually, I want to come back to that. That's a great comment, but let's come back to that. Letting go of ego, letting go of ego, surrender, acceptance. Beautiful. It is confidence in faith and ourselves that enables us to be quiet until it is time to speak or respond. I love that. Well put. Beautiful. If you are fully confident and strong inside yourself, what others say about you will not affect your savlanut. Right. Yeah, I saw that. Great. Silence may be a way of not responding defensively, but considering how we can use the information. Oh, that's wonderful. Yes. Be confident in who you are, but with no need to prove yourself. This is all really good stuff. Think before you speak. Do not speak out of anger. Yes. Process of self-improvement. Start with self-criticism. Make progress towards a better self. Wonderful. See how your actions, guys, there's more here than I even have time to read. This is amazing. See how you come across others' perspective of your action. Resting in equanimity and knowing one's core light. Challenge us to be compassionate and understanding of self and the world. That was just so wonderful. Great. Okay. So I think really between you said it many times over, much better than I could. So I only want to come back to that one comment that was talking about the relationship between these two things, right? Between having this self-confidence and hearing yourself disgraced and yet remaining silent. And I want to say, I think as that person was saying in that comment, there's a difference. I think we all know from our own lives this. I think these sources help us draw it out. There's a difference between a kind of shallow self-confidence, a kind maybe arrogance or brashness, right? And a kind of like deep, quiet inner confidence that means we're also open to learning and growing, that we're also open to seeing our shortcomings. And therefore, as many of you said so beautifully in your comments, when we hear criticism, instead of acting defensively, right, instead of like wanting to lash out or speak out of anger, we actually might have the confidence, have the strength to say, oh, maybe I have something to learn from this. Or maybe the right thing to do here is just be quiet and receive this, and then go forward in whatever way is most wise and skillful after that. So that's different to what we might normally think of as the confident answer, right? Which is like, if someone criticizes me and I'm confident, I'm just going to reply immediately saying, no, I'm perfect. Thank you very much. It's a different kind of confidence. Oh, I love this. This is great. Confidence is rooted in our fallibility. That's great, John. Those who believe themselves infallible lack the confidence to face their own limitations. Brilliant. I can't say it much better than that. That's really great. Okay. There's a question on the chat about reincarnation. It's a big subject, but the short answer is actually kind of in a way similar to the astrology thing. The timeline is different, but many of our mystical sources talk about reincarnation and again, pretty much take it for granted. And many of our non-mystical sources, again, including people like Maimonides, deride the idea completely. So it's something, there's already a big division in Jewish sources between mystics and non-mystics. Happy to, if anyone wants to be in touch with me after the class about any of these questions, I'm really, this is the stuff I love and do for fun. So I'm happy to email about this stuff with any of you. My email's on the sheet. So let's move forward to section 2. Let's see a little bit more material about Teshuva and Elul. And first of all, we're going to see a beautiful short passage from the Zohar. It says here about Teshuva, Teshuva restores everything. Sorry, wait, I'm going to share my screen again so you can read along with me. I forgot. Teshuva restores everything, repairing above, repairing below, mending oneself, mending the whole world. Let's read that one more time. Teshuva restores everything, repairing above, repairing below, mending oneself, mending the whole world. Very poetic and flowery as much of the Zohar is. But also, there's an insistence here that when we enter into this process of Teshuva, and we do this work of trying to return to our better selves, return to the divine, return to the source, as is the key work of Elul as we approach the new year at this time, we are not just fixing ourselves. We are actually fixing the above, the below, the everything, the whole world, right? We are fixing the universe. The concept of tikkun olam. If you look closely at the Aramaic words of the Zohar there, the last 3 words, I can even highlight them so you can see them, right? Atkin l'chol alma. That's the Aramaic version of the Hebrew words for tikkun olam, fixing the world. So we fix the world, we repair the world, we make the world a better place when we do this inner work. And in our tradition, this is really one of the strongest principles at the foundation of so much of Judaism, is this insistence of connection, of the connection between what's going on inside us and what's going on outside us. We cannot separate. We cannot say, oh, I'm going to steal this money, but I'll still be a nice person in this other area of my life and everything will be fine. Or like, I'm going to be, horrible to like certain people in my family, which, is really hard for us not to be sometimes. That's like a very challenging area for a lot of us. But that I'm going to have really difficult relationships with these people in my family, and that's not going to affect anything else going on in the rest of my life, the rest of the universe. No, like it's all connected. It's all sometimes so painfully and so difficult to face and enter into, but it's really, really, really all connected. And so sometimes the areas which are most challenging, when we can make some progress with them, really do have ripple effects in every other area of our lives. And the Zohar is telling us it's not just in our lives, it's really in the whole universe. And we're going to see a little bit more of how that theology is developed now in the next source. So the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Chasidic movement, he takes that principle from the Zohar we just saw and says something incredible about it. He says, this is a great principle. Everything in the world contains the holy sparks of the divine. Nothing is empty of the sparks, not even trees or stones, not human behavior. Even the wrongdoings that people do have these sparks of the cosmic breaking in them. So he's referring back to the story of creation, according to the great Kabbalist known as the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, who was in the north of Israel in Sfat in the 1500s. And Rabbi Isaac Luria said that when the universe was made, God poured love and light, the Ein Sof, the Infinite One, was pouring love and light into the universe, and that the vessels the universe was made of just couldn't take all that love and light. One understanding of the story is because they didn't know how to share. They didn't know how to let the light flow through them to each other. They tried to hold on to it themselves. And because of that, those vessels broke. And so the story goes, the whole universe is full of the sparks of the divine. And our job is to find those sparks, to uncover them and to raise them back up to their source. And every time we do that, that's an act of tikkun olam, of fixing the universe. That's actually the original meaning for the Kabbalists of fixing the universe. There's a even earlier rabbinic meaning too, but that's what the Kabbalists mean when they say fixing the universe, finding the sparks of the divine and raising them back up to their source. And the Baal Shem Tov here is saying those sparks are in everything, absolutely everything, including the things that we do which are wrong, including the things that we do. The Hebrew word here is avera, which means a transgression or a sin. The things which we do, which we are ashamed of, we feel guilty about, we would rather not admit to ourselves or anyone else, we'd rather not think about them. Actually, they have the sparks of the divine in them. And I'll continue reading the source. And what are the sparks from the breaking? What are these sparks of the divine? They are Teshuva. They are this very concept of returning to our best self, returning to the divine. That is Teshuva. When a person makes Teshuva for a wrongdoing, they elevate the sparks that were in that action to the higher world. Hence the verse which describes divine forgiveness says, bearing sin, meaning lifting the sin upwards. That's a playful Hasidic rereading of a verse from the Torah, which talks about the divine being one who forgives us. Another way of saying forgive us is to bear our sin, to lift it up. But the Baal Shem Tov is saying it's not just meaningless that the Torah uses that phrase to talk about how God bears our sin. God is actually helping us to lift up the spark inside that thing we did, which is seemingly a wrongdoing. Again, seemingly something we'd rather not think about. Actually, there's a spark there. There's something that we can actually be proud of. There's something we can be proud of. And just to give another example from the Hasidic sources about this, the Maggid of Mezrich, who's a student of the Baal Shem Tov, talks about how we sometimes think that somebody who sins, which is all of us, right? People who do the wrong things, we sometimes think of them as being on a lower level to people who are completely righteous. But he says it's not so. Actually, he's referring back to the Talmud where this principle first comes from, but he puts it in his own way. And he says the appetite, the desire, the lust, whatever it was that drove you to do the thing that was wrong, right? Whatever the thing you said or did was that you are recognizing now you wish you hadn't done, there was a desire and an appetite and a lust behind it. He says that is amazing. That is divine and holy. It just needs to be directed. That's all. It just needs to be redirected. And he says that is much better than a state of existence that has no appetite and desire and lust, no desire, no will, no love of life. Right? He says it's much better to have that passion and just need to work on redirecting it than to live without that passion. So that's very much from the same school of teaching. Just see a question about that. Are these the corrections that the Kabbalists speak about? Exactly. Beautiful. Yeah, exactly. When Kabbalists talk about tikkunim, making fixings, making correct corrections in the world, they're talking about raising up those sparks and specifically redirecting our emotions, our passions, our desires to things which are healthy and which serve us. And if any of you have ever tried to give up something which wasn't good for you, and you've worked on eating less sugar or smoking less cigarettes or whatever it was, it's much harder if we just say to ourselves, I'm just going to completely cut that thing out of my life and that's it, end of sentence. It's much harder if we do that than if we say, I'm going to take the desire for that thing and redirect it towards something else, right? It's much easier if we take that, the neural circuits and the emotional circuits and our body's yearning for whatever it is that we're yearning for when we reach out for the thing we'd rather not reach out for. If we can find a way to hone in on that and redirect it, that's also a very, very important sense of what Teshuva is, right? Returning. Like, where do I want to return my passions and appetites and emotions to? I should at least try and exercise some choice and agency over them, right? That's the invitation here. And one more source in this vein from the Hasidic masters. This is from Reb Nosson, who was the main student of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And he took over, after Rabbi Nachman died, he took over leading the movement of the Breslov Hasidim. And believe it or not, the Breslov Hasidim were persecuted very severely by other Hasidic groups. They were called heretics. There was a lot of really nasty actions. And reading now this source here after the Baal Shem Tov at the end of section 2, And there was this time called the Years of Oppression, and there was this time when the Savrana Hasidim would attack the Breslova Hasidim, even to the point of physically wounding them, like throwing stones at them, making them bleed very, very severely. It would also get them arrested by the authorities, which was no joke in those days. And people, the Breslov Hasidim came to Reb Nosson, their leader, and they said, "What are we supposed to do? These people are, they're harming us, they're persecuting us, they're making our lives very hard. What should we do?" And Reb Nosson said, "They, our persecutors, are our brothers. Eventually, they will be rectified. We ourselves will have to seek remedies for them." I wanted to bring this as an example of how, the Zohar said before, I'll just scroll back up to it now on the previous page, Teshuva restores everything, repairing above, repairing below, mending oneself, mending the world. So the Hasidic masters take this, and this is just one example, they take it and they say, even those people who we might think of as our enemies, even those people we might think of as us having very difficult relationships with, people we would rather not think about, people we're angry at, we have an intimate, codependent relationship with them when it comes to Teshuva. We might not like to admit it, and we might not even sense it directly, but when we do the work of Teshuva, actually, it also has an effect on them. And that when we make Teshuva, when we do this work of trying to heal ourselves and return to our best selves, we're actually doing it for everyone in the whole world. Even those people we have challenges with right now, even those people we'd rather not think about. Just saw a beautiful comment on the chat from Robert. That's what Dalai Lama says about the Chinese. That's so beautiful. If you think about the profound suffering that the Chinese army and regime caused to the Dalai Lama and his people, right? That's such an incredibly profound thing that he's able to have that. So that's exactly what the Hasidim are saying. And actually, it's a bigger subject, not much time for it now, but there's a lot of overlap and similarities between the approach of the Hasidim and the approach of the Buddhists in this particular area. No, I don't want to pretend that Buddhism and Judaism are the same, or they agree on everything. That's not the case. But in this area, there's really a lot of resonance. Let's continue, friends. Let's see a little bit more. I'm going to share my screen again for section 3. Just going to take a swig of tea. So I think we're all very familiar with the kind of religion, at the very least you've heard about it, which is, what we sometimes call fire and brimstone religion, which says people do bad things and we should feel bad. God is perfect. God made the universe. God is all loving. We are the ones who mess the world up. Okay. The first verse here is a good example of that. Ecclesiastes 7:29, right, top of the page. "Behold, only this I have found, that God has made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes." Meaning, God made us fine. Like, if we would just do the right thing all the time, then everything will be fine. But there's another possibility. There's another way of looking at it too that our tradition offers us too. And it's based on this verse in Psalms that the rabbis of the Midrash bring us this incredibly radical alternative theology when it comes to sin and teshuva. They say on this verse that says, "Come and see the deeds of God, awesome in his plot toward humanity." So the word plot there is really important. In Hebrew, it's alilah. And alilah, it means a plot in the sense of a sneaky, roundabout way of doing things, backhandedly. It also means a false accusation, like a libel, right? So come and see the deeds of God, awesome in his plot towards the humanity. This is just one way of translating the verse. The verse can be translated lots of different ways because it's very dense poetic language. But this is how Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha, our great sage, translated it and understood it. And here's what he says about it. "Even the awesome events you bring upon us, you bring them through a plot. Come and see. When the Holy One made the world, from the first day he already made the angel of death. And Adam was created on the 6th day. And a plot was hanged on him that he would bring death to the world, as it says, for on the day that you eat thereof, you shall surely die." And I just want to check in with you all and make sure that was super clear what he said. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha says, we understand the creation story at the beginning of Genesis to tell us that death was created as a possibility on the first day. It's not actually in the plain meaning of the Torah. It's not in the verse, but that's the rabbinic understanding of the Torah, that death was there, the possibility of death was there from the first day. But Adam, the first human being, was created on day 6, and yet Adam gets blamed for bringing death to the world after he eats from the fruit of the forbidden tree, right? So how can you blame something for bringing death to the world, blame Adam for bringing death to the world when death already existed? Doesn't make sense. Let's carry on because it actually gets even more radical. So this is like a man who wanted to divorce his wife. He wrote a get, that's a writ of divorce, and came home with the get in his hand, looking for an excuse to give it to her. He said to her, "Pour me a drink." She poured it for him, and as he took the cup from her hand, he said to her, "Here's your get." She said, "What have I done wrong?" He said to her, "Get out of my house. You poured me a lukewarm drink." She said to him, "Did you already know that I was going to pour you a lukewarm drink, that you had already written a get and placed it in my hand?" So what's going on here? A get, bill of divorce, is very hard to write. You cannot write it on the spot, right? It needs to be signed by witnesses, notarized, rabbis, etc. Very long, complicated process. This man has it already. He's already done it all, waiting for an excuse to give the woman, his wife, right? And the woman rightly says, "How can you say that we're getting divorced and that it's because I gave you a drink when you clearly had the get ready already first?" Now, the Midrash continues actually in very surprising fashion to say that this is what Adam says to God. And even more radically, God doesn't have an answer. The conversation ends with Adam having the last word. Adam says, "God, this makes no sense. It's a setup. You're framing me. This is a plot. This is a scheme. This is a libel. You're blaming me for death when death already existed. You're saying, oh, we're getting divorced because I did this thing, but you had the plan to divorce me before I even did the thing." And God has no response. Meaning, this is a deep truth about the human condition. Here we are in this world, in this universe that none of us made, that none of us understand. It's very hard to be a person and always do the right thing. It's very hard to always get everything right. We all make mistakes all the time. That's the nature of life. So how, Adam, and here the rabbis are saying to God, how can you expect us to feel bad? Right? This is how it goes. Right now, obviously, we shouldn't take that as license to deliberately make everything terrible, to make a big mess, to make everything worse, to cause more suffering. God forbid, that's not the intention. But maybe to have a little bit of rachmanis, some compassion. So some compassion on ourselves that, okay, we have sinned. We've done things wrong. We have. But like, okay, we're people. This is what it means to be alive. And that's okay too. And that we don't need this heavy, guilty, shame feeling to dominate this whole relationship with God and this whole relationship of Teshuva. It doesn't need to be dominated by shame and guilt. I'd like to pause there and just see if anyone wants to share any reflections or questions about any of this before we carry on. Feel free to put it in the chat or you can raise your hand, whatever you like. Fine. I see that unless I ask a specific question, it's not going to happen. So let's continue on a little bit more. We'll see more material, and I'll see if I can come up with one more specific question for us before we end. So the next source over the page, let me share my screen again, from the Me'or Einayim, great Hasidic master, also a student of the Baal Shem Tov, top of the next page. Teshuva is a positive mitzvah, a positive commandment or connection from the Torah, and therefore it should be done with joy. I just wanted to reinforce this point. This return to the divine is about joy and love. And actually, for the Hasidim, that was actually essential. That if there's no other way to return, that any return that doesn't include that joy and that love is actually not really including all of us. And another teaching below that from the Breslov tradition, from Reb Nosson, he points out that sometimes the days of that we're in right now of Elul through Yom Kippur are called Yemei Ratzon, that which means the days of will or the days of desire. And that's often understood to mean that these are the days that we hope that the divine will desire us, that we hope the days the divine will receive us with desire. You know, we will pray in return, and we hope that God will desire our prayers, hear our prayers, and so on. But he says there's another meaning too. He says also the days of our ratzon, of our yearning and our desire and our will. And it's the opportunity to work on what do we really want, and to think about what we really want and to reflect on it and to work with it. And he says, when we do that work of working with our will and our desire, through that, we achieve a healthy awe. And awe is that word sometimes translated as fear also, right? But I prefer awe. That's what's so familiar to so many of us from the season of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right? So this heavy emphasis on you should be scared of God. He says the way to get to healthy awe of God is through desire. It's through, I want to be so close to the divine that I'm scared of losing that relationship. That's a very, also a very common teaching from the Baal Shem Tov and all the Chasidim, that healthy fear is actually a fear of the loss of love. It's not a fear of punishment, right? It's a fear of the loss of intimacy. And that's what we really want. And it starts from looking at what do we really want in life and how we can redirect that again, really. Do that work of redirecting. We just have one more source left, and I'll come back to you all. This is from the earliest source. Actually, we have two. I'll end with this. This will be the last one we look at. This is from Shari Teshuva, the Gates of Teshuva, from Rabbi Yonah. He says, quoting in Midrash, if you did bundles of transgressions, now do bundles of good deeds. He says, if one's legs ran to do transgressions, now run to do mitzvot. If one's tongue lied, then use one's tongue to speak truth, wisdom, and teachings of kindness. If one's hands spill blood, then open your hands to give to your needy brother. If you once caused conflicts, now seek and pursue peace. And I think that's a good place for us to end and think about together, what are the areas of our lives where we need to look at what we've done and redirect things. And I just want to expand on Rabbi Yonah. He says this is about the parts of our body that we've done these things with, which is wonderful, and we should take that advice. And also, I want to say the other parts of ourselves, our hearts, our emotions, our relationships. What are the various different ways that we have expressed ourselves in ways that haven't been optimal? And how can we redirect them? I think for the sake of time, I should end there. I'd just like to say that, first of all, I wish I'd heard a little bit more from all of you. And next time I'll try and facilitate that better, so there'll be a bit more participation. And also that if any of you would like to follow up with me, my email and website is on the handout. Also, it's appliedjewishspirituality.org. And there's many, many online classes there that I teach and others teach, including many for free. So if you're interested, that's appliedjewishspirituality.org. You can be in touch with me, and I'd love to keep in touch. And otherwise, I'll see you next month for the same class again for the following month. So I wish you a very, very lovely Chodesh Tov, a wonderful new moon and new month of Elul. I hope it's a meaningful, beautiful month for all of you of this work of Teshuva. Take care.